Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight, our guest, Richard Tomcala. We'll be talking to him in a few minutes, but first there are several fairly significant news stories that we need to look at. I think one that may be significant is that it looks like the time has passed for Congress to veto the District of Columbia Medical Marijuana Act, so that's probably official now. And quite frankly, I'll tell you that it's been fueling a daydream that brings a smile to my face when I think of the head of the DEA looking out of his office window and having to stare at the sign on a medical marijuana dispensary across the street. Let's hope it happens soon. Two more stories that really are more serious. The first is a new study has been released in which they looked at the effect of marijuana on driving. And in this particular study, which used a large number of subjects, they used simulators to put drivers in real driving conditions, including emergency situations with cars pulling out in front of them or stopping in front of them, trees falling, sudden rainstorms, quick light changes, all of the typical driving situations. And what they found was there was no measurable difference in driving safety between those that were high on marijuana and those that were not. And they also would take the same people, test them before they used marijuana, while they were high, and afterward, and found no significant differences. One thing they did find that was different was that people, when they were high, were slightly more subject to distraction, but not as much as, say, those using a cell phone. So this goes a long way toward countering the scare stories we've been hearing about all of the stoned drivers on the road. The other story that's important, the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out with a new policy in which they recommend that doctors screen all middle school children for alcohol use. Now, this is significant for a number of reasons. Alcohol is, without a doubt, the most socially destructive drug in our society. 100,000 deaths a year from alcohol-related diseases, several thousand deaths a year from acute intoxication, over 15,000 deaths a year from alcohol-related car wrecks. It's directly related to high instances of domestic abuse and assault-type crimes. We know that about 2/3 of the population uses alcohol, and that of those, between 10 and 15% develop dependencies to alcohol. Most of these dependent users that are the ones causing most of the problems start using very early in life, surprisingly as young as 8 to 10 years old. So that if doctors are able to detect and head off some of this behavior, it should pay great dividends. Something else that probably could come out of this is that the nearest thing to a gateway drug, a drug whose use leads people to use other drugs, the nearest thing to a gateway drug that has been identified is alcohol. Virtually all people that develop dependencies on any of the so-called dangerous drugs. Started out using alcohol or tobacco or both before the age of about 12. So once again, screening for early alcohol use should give us a head start to screening for the other dangerous uses of the other drugs. Once again, of the other drug use, only about 10% of the users ever develop dependencies. Now, brain science yet cannot tell us what makes one person become dependent on a drug where 9 other users use it some with no problems. Behavioral clues have been determined. Virtually all people that develop drug dependencies, and that includes alcohol, were either sexually or physically abused as children or come from dysfunctional or broken families. So once again, if we can detect the early use of alcohol, we can then look for those background and environmental factors and quite possibly be able to intervene in time to head off those most likely to be problematic or dependent with their later use of any of the drugs. Now, let me remind you here, the phone lines are live. This is your show. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, please call the number on your screen. If you're watching on YouTube or streaming video on the internet, we have an email address on the screen. Send me an email. I'll answer you fairly quickly, and we might use your comment or question on the next program. Now, excuse me, our guest tonight has a long and interesting history here in Houston and was telling me some things about Houston that I didn't know. Richard was at one time the proprietor of a business here in Houston called the Texas Hemp Company. Richard, would you care to tell us a little bit about what kind of store that was and what happened then?
Absolutely. The Texas Hemp Company, as it came to be known, originated in 1992 as Legal Marijuana, the Hemp Store. A gentleman named Richard Lee.
This is the same Richard Lee that's now Oaksterdam University.
That's one and the same. Son of the chair of the Republican Party for some 25 years, yes. Ann Lee. In point of fact, had a very few hemp items. And like all great ideas, it only took a fraction of a second for the both of us to kind of realize that making some way for those items and other items available here in Houston would, in our optimistic point of view, would go far in terms of turning around this negative smokescreen that has been circulating about marijuana and cannabis for the past few decades. One thing led to another, several conversations between us, and it was decided that we'd rent a small space down in the Montrose and start a hemp store.
Oh, is this the first one in Houston? Or?
It most certainly was the first one in Houston and Texas, but even more provocative is it was the first actual hemp store in America.
That's amazing.
It truly is amazing, and without bragging, just the novelty of the idea of, you know, supposedly backwater Houston, you know, being at the forefront of such an important movement, yeah, has always been a point of immense pride for myself, and I'm sure Richard as well. We started over on Alabama Street as Legal Marijuana, the Hemp Store, and had our very good friend and now deceased Jack Herrera come, and we had a 2-day festival to celebrate our grand opening.
Jack just recently passed away.
He did.
Most of us know of him as the author of his book,
The Emperor Wears No Clothes, aptly named, and that, I think, like all great statesmen, should be thought of as his papers. his actual impact was going around the country tirelessly for several decades, bringing the message, on a personal level and right to people, councils, Senate hearings. He spoke in a variety of settings over the time that he was most active, and his passing, incredibly sad to anyone who has ever thought well of cannabis, hemp, marijuana.
Well, just because I know a lot of the viewers don't understand this, you keep throwing around the three words cannabis, hemp, and marijuana. What's the relationship between them?
Well, the relationship is this. It's etymological. It is, they are, and all three and many others refer to the very same plant. Cannabis sativa L is one of the Latin, it's the Latin species and subgenus sativa. There is another subgenus indica. And there is even some debate out there, as there is a third one, ruderalis. That said, the other words that have come to mean and be a part of our vernacular, hemp. Hemp is the traditional, and in any definition of a word, you'll have a traditional word usage, and hemp is that. Marijuana, grass, pot, all of those are slang.
Okay, I believe we have a phone caller.
Outstanding.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, my name is Vincent, and I just want to say that I watch you guys all the time, and I believe what you say is really enthusiastic, really inspirational. It does make a difference. But I do have a question, though.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is, and regardless if they're going bad now in East Asia when people want to buy drugs around the street, do you think, because they always tell me all the time, because they always, up in Canada where you're not illegal there, they should allow, weed and this and drugs and that in the United States. Do you think they should be doing that or probably not?
Okay, thank you. My contention on this has been that prohibition laws of any kind do not work.
Most certainly.
And I don't care if you're trying to prohibit marijuana or heroin or alcohol like we did in the 20s, or gambling or prostitution, or as the English did 200 years ago, importing French watches into England. Prohibition laws do not work. They don't stop the flow of the goods. They increase the prices. They make the quality risky. They attract organized crime and violence to the markets, and they corrupt law enforcement. However you feel about drugs and their use, the way to handle those problems is not by making commerce in them illegal.
There's certainly definitive proof to back that up. Throughout history, the addicted population has remained less than 10% of the population, regardless of what laws or rulings or attempts by government or monarchs to regulate it. It really hasn't had that much impact. In fact, the most significant negative spike or increase in addiction in America happened during the prohibition of alcohol. Significantly. There is no upside to legislation criminalizing these substances.
And the funny thing is, people object and say, but if you legalize marijuana, there would be a whole lot more of it around and more people using it. The government's own figures right now are that well over 40% of the adult Americans have used it regularly. Surveys the government has conducted every year for 30 years, high school students say that marijuana is easier for them to get a hold of than are tobacco or cigarettes either. So it doesn't keep it off the market.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hi. I I was just wondering, you were talking about hemp. Isn't it true that the Constitution was written on hemp paper and it was illegal not to grow hemp back in Jefferson's day?
Close.
Okay, thank you.
Close. The story goes that the original drafts of the Declaration of Independence were written on hemp paper, and there is a surviving example of this. The point is that the other paper of choice at that point was rag paper, was cloth paper, and it was quite expensive. Hemp, on the other hand, was a economic, second grade, as it were, a newsprint of sort of the day, because we had not yet figured out how to cut down trees and turn them into paper products.
And the other side of that is, from the time the government first started printing paper money during the Civil War until the 1930s, all of the federal paper money was printed on hemp paper because it was durable and wore longer. And we'll take a break and come back and talk some more hemp.
Okay, maybe a little of the money I spend on marijuana supports terror and violence.
Right.
And that's because marijuana is illegal.
Exactly.
When I buy a beer, that doesn't support terror because beer is legal, right?
Now you've got it.
So what you're saying is if we make marijuana legal and regulate it like beer, that wouldn't support violence.
Did I say that?
Then the kids seem to be more at the doing end of things.
Well, we're back with Richard Tomcala, the pioneer of the Texas hemp company, the legal marijuana store that started out in Houston. We're talking a little bit about hemp and marijuana. And before the break, we'd started out, can you clarify us a little bit more the difference between marijuana and hemp?
Certainly. While they all are the same basic plant, like any agricultural product, you grow it for what you want it to do. Grow it for the flowers, and it certainly has its medicinal and recreational application. Grow it for the seed, of course, for the oil that's available through that, or the most common is, it's called a feral hemp, a more wild hemp, if you will, is grown for the stalk and basic mass. Each has its, its characteristics that are specific to its breed. There are many, many types of corn, and yet we consider them all corn. Yeah. The same is true in this instance. The notion that that most of the hemp or marijuana grown anywhere in the world has any psychotropic properties is a fallacy. In fact, I read at one point that over 95% of all marijuana that is found growing in America is feral hemp, is such a low percentage of THC.
And as someone once described that as saying, you could smoke a joint the size of a telephone pole and all you would get is a headache.
Pretty much, people not particularly aware came into the store on a regular basis and asked if they could smoke, you know, the hats or the shirts or whatever. And you know, the clip that we came back with is that, well, if you'd like to smoke stem, then by all means, crunch it up and have a go. But the fiber does come out of the stem, and there's no THC present there.
Yeah, and it's like anything else. I've got a summer place in New Mexico, and wild strawberries grow there. And the ripe, mature berries are about a 1/4 inch in diameter and very, very sour. Those strawberries I get in the grocery store are the same plant, but they've been selected and bred and nurtured so that they're a variant that comes out with great big and much sweeter fruit. And hemp and marijuana, it's the same kind of thing.
I guess what the caller may be trying to get at is that folks that do legislation like to refer to, you know, hemp products as marijuana and that evil marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana as a word referring to cannabis sativa was adopted by one of the more horrible men in media in American history, William Randolph Hearst. And it's coined from a Mexican folk song. But the idea of using the word hemp in a scare tactic way, it just wasn't flying. So you come up with this much more exotic word, marijuana. And to the populations of America in the 20s and 30s, that just sounded dangerous.
Well, you know, history's kind of where I've been going. And the thing that amazes me is that before about 1915, it's almost as if marijuana, cannabis, and hemp were 3 totally separate plants, and they never met and they never shook hands with each other. Europeans and Americans in the eastern part of the country grew hemp, and they made rope and cloth out of it. People in Europe had learned from India and grew cannabis and made medicine out of it, and a little bit of it was sold in America as medicine under the name cannabis. Marijuana, as that evil, awful, destructive narcotic, came across the border from Panama and Mexico between about 1910 and 1915. But no one seemed to recognize until much later that they were the same plant.
Exactly. The confusion continues.
Yeah. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. I was actually wondering, there's some friends of mine, you know, some people I know, and several people have come to me with a telephone number. It's a 800 number, and they say that it's a government-sponsored telephone number that lets you call to vote for the legalization of marijuana. Now, I was wondering if there's any validity to this, because it just doesn't seem right. You know, okay. It doesn't seem like it'd be true to me.
Okay.
If it sounds too good to be true,
chances are it is.
It's too good to be true. There is no reason to propel our government to move off its fossilized hydrocarbon base, none whatsoever.
You know, anyone can set up an 800 number. I would personally suspect that as much as anything, you may be falling into a scam there.
And worse yet, you know, some recording device. One can't overlook that possibility.
And it may be someone is actually trying to collect a list of names so that they can yell at the government and say 1,700 million people or whatever say this. So who knows what an 800 phone number is.
Exactly, and at the end of the day, there is the Drug Policy Foundation of Texas, votehemp.com, several normal groups that have established themselves in the fight. And like any other lobbying, the bigger the interest, the more defined or experienced and established lobbying groups are going to be approached.
Yeah. You've been hinting at something, and And this is, what about the oil from the hemp plant? You keep talking about alternative fuels and green.
Absolutely.
What does the hemp plant have to do in that direction?
Well, what it has to do is the very same thing that corn is currently doing, but at a much, much more efficient rate. Corn still requires a bit of herbicides and pesticides to help itself along, which is a downside and a net negative environmental gain. In addition, and this is a quote from Jack Herrera's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, that hemp provides 40 times as much biomass per acre as corn. I'm not certain how many tons that is per acre or pounds or whatever, but it sounds like it's a lot more efficient than the approach that we're taking now. And it speaks directly to one of the big arguments against biomass-based ethanol. It's taking away food. Well, hemp is not human food, not at least the stalks and the biomass.
Not a major, yeah.
Not the stalks and the biomass. Now, the seeds, on the other hand, are pure rocket fuel, but that's a different thing. And I guess it's important to understand that this is not a new idea. This is not something that is an outgrowth of the corn-based ethanol movement, but rather a predecessor to it. There was most notably a cover of Popular Mechanics in the 1940s with a rather established fellow named Henry Ford on it, showing off his brand new hemp car in which all of the body components, everything other than the steel and metal parts, were made out of hemp. And this speaks to all manner of hydrocarbons, plastics and vinyls and all sorts of things, and was powered by it. So this isn't something that, you know, folks have just come up with lately.
However, wasn't Henry's hemp car like the hemp Mercedes in the 1990s in that it was a seed oil-based diesel engine, not
Yes, it was
cellulose-based?
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, but that's the nice thing is hemp can go either way.
You can make gasoline in your backyard. I've long contended that the underlying backstory of why marijuana, hemp, cannabis is illegal in America is that you can make fuel out of it. Mm-hmm. And the notion of any of us being able to afford an oil well is pretty distant, but finding a few acres of land.
Yeah. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Buford. This is Steve Haig, Media Director with the Texas Coalition for Compassionate Care. How are you all this evening?
Just fine. How are you tonight?
Good evening.
Very well, thanks. Buford, as always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. I actually am calling this evening. I have an exclusive announcement for your viewers this evening.
Great.
The Texas Coalition for Compassionate Care is taking our meetings and our message on the road. We're beginning to hold meetings in cities and towns all around Texas. Because the truth is, we can't really succeed, Buford, in providing safe access to cannabinoid medicines for Texas patients and veterans without every Texan pitching in and doing at least a letter or something to the respective congressmen.
Yes.
So, we've just in the past few hours secured 2 locations for our first meeting on the road. It's going to be held June 22nd, right here in Houston, Texas. Now, there's going to be 2 sessions. During the afternoon, it'll be from 2 to 4. It's going to be held at the Luscan Branch Public Library on 2510 Willowick, just off Westheimer.
Okay.
And that's designed for legislators, staffers, media, and concerned citizens to see our 30-minute PowerPoint presentation of the current bill draft. And then we'll take questions and answers after that. We ask that all concerned citizens call, write, email their Texas state representatives and senators and invite them down to the meeting. And when I'm finished here, I'll give you the website address where you can get more information.
I was going to ask, do you have all of the details up on the web so that people can look it up?
Actually, Buford, we're within 48 hours of releasing our next newsletter for June. And so your viewers this evening are getting a sneak preview
Because you're on this evening and because I'm a Houstonian as well, I wanted to make sure I let everyone know here first. It will be published in the newsletter, and so I want everyone to go to texascompassion.com, sign up for the newsletter, and all of the information will actually be sent to your inbox within the next 48 hours. And, of course, you can always go to the website after that as well and keep up with what we're doing and get the information for the meeting. Now, the second session is going to be held 7:30 to 9 p.m. It will be held at the Universalist Unitarian Church at 5200 Fannin Street. That has a great meeting hall and good parking access for everyone. And essentially we'll begin the meeting with the PowerPoint presentation to explain the bill draft we're currently shopping to senators and representatives. As well as following, we'll have our regular meeting of the Texas Coalition for Compassionate Care. So everyone, it's a public forum, so everyone can come and listen to us conduct business. And we hope to see everyone there. I do want to remind you again that a new newsletter will be out in 48 hours.
Okay.
TexasCompassion.com. Sign up, and we hope to see you out there. And we hope that you write to your representative and senator to come on out and see the presentation.
Okay, thank you. And it will be up on TexasCompassion.com in about 48 hours. Is that correct?
Excellent.
That's correct. It'll also be in our June newsletter coming out shortly, too. So if you sign up, it'll be sent to your inbox by Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. That is a very important piece of legislation for compassionate use here in Texas.
And since only 14 states in the District of Columbia are ahead of us, we're not totally at the back of the pack.
We're not at the end of the line yet.
But we're rapidly getting there. Well, we've talked a little bit about fiber. We've talked a little bit about fuel, a little bit about marijuana. Why don't we talk a little bit about hemp seeds?
Absolutely. One of my favorite areas with nutrition being such an important issue. The hemp seed is like rocket fuel. We got a call. So,
okay. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, Professor. In your expert opinion, will I ever see the legalization of marijuana in Texas?
Let's don't say my expert opinion, because here I'm just wildly guessing like everyone else. About 15 years ago, when I first started examining the issue, I said marijuana is going to be legal in 5 years.
and well, it should have been.
That was 15 years ago. About 2 years ago, I said, well, I was wrong then, but it's time to say it again. And I'm going to stick with it. I really think, well, what I've been saying for some time is the people of the United States have legalized marijuana. The government just hasn't caught up yet.
Absolutely, and the very fact that people like you, Jack Herrera, you know, these respected individuals around the country are for it. I mean, the groundswell is beyond belief.
But if something doesn't happen in this section of Congress, I think it will next year. And it's time to take a break again.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson for NORML. For 30 years, NORML has provided a voice for the millions of Americans who smoke marijuana responsibly. More than 500,000 Americans are arrested each year for smoking pot. These are ordinary citizens like you and me, whose lives and careers are being needlessly destroyed. To learn how you can help, contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
Okay, we're back. We were just we're talking with Richard Tomcala, one of the founders of the legal hemp business in Houston, and we were about to talk about some of the nutritional benefits of the hemp plant.
To make it easy to understand, if you had the hemp seed oil available to you, 2 to 3 tablespoons represents all of the protein required by a human, and it comes without, you know, all the toxins and additional fat that proteins from meats. It is, and I just come back to this phrase every time I think of it, rocket fuel for humans.
Well, I personally don't go into such disreputable places. But I have heard that if you go into any of these so-called health food and vitamin stores, that you can get all sorts of hemp seed and hemp oil products, both foods, even salad dressing and things, as well as cosmetics.
Absolutely. The cosmetics, as near as I can tell, have no more benefit than just some other natural-based product. But the one critical issue about hemp seed oil, and I can't stress this enough, is how old is it? It does decay. It decays rather rapidly, and the expiration dates on the products, you would need to look at them very carefully and to keep them chilled. So if you buy smaller, that you can consume more quickly, and you can never do too much.
And I did notice, so someone in fact brought it on the show about a year ago, someone now is marketing a milk substitute using hemp oil instead of dairy butterfat. Yeah.
That makes a considerable amount of sense.
And to throw a little historical gem, back in 1937, when the federal government was passing the anti-marijuana law, one of the industrial groups that opposed the law as it was first written were the birdseed manufacturers who complained that canaries would not sing unless their food included hemp seeds.
And bless their hearts, they prevailed, and you can still, to this day, buy hemp seed.
But it's sterile.
It is sterilized. Yeah. It is sterilized. That, however, does not impact the nutritional value.
We have to take another break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. I got my signals crossed up. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Hello? Are you there, caller?
Hello?
Yes. Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I wanted to know, since when did Santa Claus start smoking weed?
Well, you know, Santa Claus only has to work one night a year.
That's right. I would assume
he's got to do something the other 364 days.
That's right.
You didn't even know that he took his off time in Houston, did you? But one thing, Santa's got a good laugh. You know, at least 2 states that I know of have passed state laws that would allow cultivation of hemp, but it's still blocked by the federal law that defines the drug marijuana as being any part of any cannabis plant.
Absolutely.
So what can you tell us about movements along those lines?
Very little. I think you succinctly summed it up a few moments ago when you said the nation on the whole has gotten it and are prepared to move forward with it. The federal government is the one and only remaining obstacle, and they're very, you know, insidious and very clever about it. My understanding is that the South Dakota people that had quite a project planned, got all the way through the permitting process, only to be then sued by the federal government to review the permit, and then by the time it got to court, the permit application had expired, then putting them back to square one. It's a little more
complex. Let's take this call and then... Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, okay. Because hydroponics a better kind of weed, and that's what the government makes. Wouldn't that, if they did legalize it, couldn't they just run the drug cartels pretty much out, at least the marijuana trade?
Okay. First, the government doesn't make hydroponic weed. They have one licensed grower in Mississippi that provides all of the marijuana the government licenses for experimentation. The people trying to do the experiments complain that the government weed is lousy weed.
Nearly feral.
Although he's been improving lately. From the research I have done, marijuana is a very easy to grow common plant. If it were legal, it should cost no more than the broccoli or tomatoes that you buy at your supermarket. And at that price, there's no way that gangs or cartels could compete with Safeway.
None.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes. I had a question. Do you ever think that they'll be able to legalize marijuana in Houston, or do you think that's too crazy?
Okay. It's a crazy dream I've been chasing for a long time. We were just saying, I think within a couple of years on a federal level.
I wonder if they'll ever go that far, or we'll just decriminalize it like other countries have. Leave it on the table, but, you know.
I don't know. The problem is, if you look at what's happened in Holland or what's been happening in California, if you simply decriminalize it, at the grow and supply end of the chain, it's still illegal. That means you've still got cartels and gangs fighting over supplying it. You've still got all of the prohibition evils there, and you've still got the high prices. So I think they're going to have to actually legalize rather than just decriminalize. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, how are you?
Do you have a question or comment?
Okay. Yes, I do have a question.
Okay.
Okay, my question was, I heard you say that they do experimentation on the marijuana.
Yes.
I was just wondering, what type of experimentation do they do?
Okay, that's a good question. Let's see if I can answer it. You can apply to the federal government to conduct medical experiments with any of the Schedule I forbidden drugs. There have been, over the past 30 to 40 years, several hundred experiments involving marijuana. Some of these just measure how dangerous it is to the people taking it. Some have measured whether it actually does relieve nausea in people taking drugs for cancer therapy, whether it does improve appetites for people that have AIDS wasting syndrome or taking therapy. Some have been whether it does relieve spasms for people with multiple sclerosis. As I say, there's been some very good work done on its use as therapy for post-traumatic stress syndrome. As I say, by now there are literally hundreds of experiments that have been done and written up in the medical literature.
It's, while that's true, given virtually any other substance, there are literally tens of thousands of studies, and they still remain obstructive on a federal level by keeping it as a Schedule I drug as opposed to a Schedule II, like heroin or Cocaine.
Well, heroin's one, but morphine is two.
Morphine is two, excuse me.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I wanted to know how can I get medicinal marijuana prescribed to me?
Move to California?
First, you're going to have to move to California, Colorado, Montana are one of about 11 other states. Unfortunately, you can't do it in Texas yet. In California is the most common example. You simply go see a doctor. He examines you briefly. You pay his fee. He writes out a note saying that he thinks you have a condition that would benefit from marijuana. You take this to a dispensary. They make a file copy of your doctor's statement, and they sell you the drug.
As it should be.
And it's time to take a break again.
I think the Bible is pretty clear that it expects justice and mercy and compassion. And I believe that to start with, and from my work as a criminologist, that our drug policy falls quite short on the issue of justice. That people are unequally treated depending on their ethnicity, their social class. And the Bible contains more than 2,000 scriptures decrying the injustice related to poverty, to oppression, to corrupt government.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We're with Richard Tomcala, formerly of the first hemp store in Houston, possibly the first in the United States. We've been ranging far and wide over hemp and marijuana. Before the break, we were talking about the plight of the hemp farmers in South Dakota, where the state approved their growing. They applied to get licenses from the DEA. First, the DEA told them that they would grant only licenses good for one growing season. Then they set a license application fee, non-refundable, that the fee itself was probably more than they could have made over the crop. And they told them that they could not even file their application until a certain date. And that date happened to be late enough so that by the time the required statutory period for comment before processing the license had occurred, it would be too late for them to plant a crop that year. So what happened there was the DEA simply wrapped them up in so much red tape there was no possible way. Now they may have filed suit since then, I don't know. If they haven't, they should.
That's my understanding, that they have fought back.
It's my understanding that one of the western states has now also passed a hemp statute. Have you heard anything about that?
That one hasn't hit my radar yet, no.
Okay. I may be wrong. It may be that they're just considering it. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I had a quick personal question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering if do you use product marijuana for like any use? You know, because like I heard that it's good for your bones. You know, when you mix with alcohol. Or I was just wondering, you know, if you have a use for it.
Okay.
The range of medical uses?
So the range of medical use has been kind of surprising. It was a legal drug until 1937. You could buy it in any drugstore. And what surprises me is that at that time, some of the most common uses included using it for migraine headaches, and pain relief is one of the main ones today, and also using it for PMS and for menstrual cramps. So I don't know, certainly not a doctor, but it's worth investigating. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Where do you go to show your support trying to help the policy get passed?
Okay, that's a very good question.
It is.
And that's something that we usually end the show with, so this is a good time. The best thing that you can do is to go directly to your elected representatives. And that includes both those in Austin representing you in the Texas legislature and the members of Congress in Washington, D.C. Now, if you have access to a computer and you go to the state of Texas official website, there's a place on it that says who is your representative or contact your representative. If you type in your zip code, it will give you the name, addresses, and phone numbers of all of your representatives. Now, what we hear back from the people in Austin especially is that the thing that counts the most, that they pay the most attention to, is a letter that's handwritten on paper and sent through the mail with a stamp on it. If you can't do that, most of them have phone numbers that you can call both locally and in their office. You can send them emails, and possibly more effective, they all have local offices in your hometown, and you can set up an appointment and go talk to them face to face. Now, I would say one of the strongest hard law enforcement representatives in Texas several years back became a major fighter for medical marijuana after an elderly woman who was confined to a wheelchair went into his office and explained why she needed medical marijuana. The personal contact is everything. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
I would like to ask, Texas being such the state as it is, I was wondering, do you think that perhaps one of the reasons that we're running into the problems here, getting it legalized, simply because Texas is what it is, and maybe the government is having some sort of funding that fits the state more than legalizing it? Wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, I think that to some extent, I think part of our real problem in Texas is that the way our political districts are set up is totally out of tune with the state. Our legislative districts are drawn up so that the small town and rural parts of the state have overwhelming political power, even though the population is now mainly in the big cities like Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. Fair redistricting next year should change that. If people raise enough hell, that changes it no matter who's in office.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. We're Americans, raise hell. I mean, that's what Ben Franklin told us even.
That's right.
Yeah. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing? I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, say marijuana does get legalized.
Yeah.
What ways do you think it'd be distributed other than for medical reasons? Are we talking like going to the store and picking up a pack of cigarettes type of deal, or how do you think it would go about distributing that to the people?
Well, that's going to depend a lot on the states and the localities.
And the market, what the market will bear and how it handles it.
I joke and say I can see it in the farmer's market right next to the spinach.
It's my understanding.
That's not going to happen because we'll probably put limits on letting kids buy it. But why shouldn't you go to a rock concert and be allowed to buy a joint just like you can buy a beer?
Same mechanism.
Why shouldn't you go into Walgreens and pick up some marijuana just like you can pick up some vitamin C? Why should there be any difference in the way it's sold?
And Americans are some of the best marketeers in the world. In fact, it's always amused me to know that the R.J. Reynolds Company actually owns the trademarks on Panama Red and Acapulco Gold.
Probably not. I mean, they supposedly registered those back in the 70s.
In the 70s.
But a trademark, if it's not used, goes away. And since they haven't been selling any Panama Gold, or Panama Red, I'm sorry, their trademark's probably no longer effective. We're just about out of time. Any last words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
I think following your lead on getting active and making your voice heard is the big secret that so many of us tend to overlook or minimize. A letter to a congressman or a representative is a very strong thing. My understanding is that it represents in their minds some 500 to 1,000 of their voters for every actual letter they received.
And if they have some kind of open house or town meetings, I'll go there, stand up, ask a question, and make them hem and haw and stammer to answer out loud in front of the people. In Houston, they have an open mic at City Council every Tuesday. Sign up and use your 3 minutes to ask the city why we don't have medical marijuana. And thank you for watching us tonight. Thank Richard for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget Texas for Compassionate Care on the 22nd. Go to their website Friday or later to get the details on that. And in the meantime, make sure that your representatives know that you're out there and know what you're concerned about. And maybe, just maybe, we can not only buy a hemp shirt made from imported hemp, we may be able to buy one made with domestic hemp and smoke the product at the same time. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatory review.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. You end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we